Hello, fellow investors, and welcome to another episode of Ritter On Real Estate. We teach you how to passively invest like a pro. Today, my guest is Michael Elefante. Michael wears many hats. He's an Airbnb investor. He's an educator. He's a content creator, and he's had a ton of success at a fairly young age. So excited to have you on the show here today, Michael, and learn about your story and give our listeners some tips.
Yeah, I appreciate you having me on. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, so tell us a little bit more about who you are and how you got to be where you are today.
Yeah, so I was an athlete all the way through college, so that was my primary focus and passion. And once that came to, a screaming halt, ended up not being able to play professionally. I was like everyone else, just like, what do I do now? So started applying to different jobs, ended up getting in tech sales, just like an entry-level job. And I was just pounding the phone every day and just told by everybody and superiors, put your time in, you'll move up the ladder, make lots of money, it'll be great. Quickly realized that I wasn't after money, I was after more time freedom. And of course, once you figure that out long-term with something like real estate, money typically comes with that, the whole aspect of financial freedom. But I realized that I didn't want to trade my time for a higher money and just trade more time for more money. So after a few years of just reading books, watching YouTube, I found a very keen interest in real estate and then went down the rabbit hole of, house hacks, small multifamily, do that type of investment. And the less cash flow per door didn't really jack me up or get me super excited, which led me to learn about short-term rentals. I actually was in the process of moving to Nashville with my wife back in 2018, at the end of 2018. And we stayed in Airbnb, and I'm like, I wonder how much they paid for this property if they're getting this per night. And this is crazy. So just started doing a bunch of number crunching and searching on the data for short-term rentals in that specific market. I looked in the Smoky Mountains also. And I was like, if this is real and I'm not crazy and I didn't miss something here, I would love to get a property. So that's what led us into getting into short-term rentals and Airbnb. And after we got our first property and saw the bookings come in, we were all in. And fast forward 2.5 years, we scaled to 6 of our own buy and hold properties. And I was just sharing, regurgitating a lot of things I was learning early on through social media, YouTube, TikTok, and Instagram, and got a lot of traction through it kind of by accident. I wasn't expecting to. And I was taking free calls for people, just trying to help them also get started because it changed our life. We became financially free in 12 months after our first investment, which was cool. So that led me down the content route and the properties, but those 6 properties gross about 80 grand a month on Airbnb and Vrbo. So it's been quite life-changing. But yeah, that's the skinny of the past, several years of my life.
Yeah, that's incredible. I love the story that you're kind of being told, just wait your turn, you'll get there, just put in your time, right? Take the normal 30-year path and one day you'll be able to retire, maybe 40 years. You decided to short circuit that. You went out, you started by educating yourself, right? I mean, that's what I heard. You were reading books, looking on YouTube, figuring all this out, and you realize there's a different path. I love that you did it at such a young age, because yeah, I mean, your runway is so long that you're already financially free at this point. So it sounds like you chose Airbnb for cash flow, right? The ability to replace your immediate cash flow. Talk to me a little bit about how you went out and maybe found that first property, and then now how do you look at evaluating where's your next property going to be?
A few things. I really like to leverage local knowledge, like a lot of real estate investors. I wanted to speak with a real estate agent who specifically sold a lot of short-term rental properties. There was a new agent in town. He had just pivoted from a different career. In the first year he was involved, he pretty much solely did short-term rentals in Nashville. So he knew the local laws and regulations, which I didn't. That was helpful. He could basically feed me properties that were short-term rental permit eligible right off the bat. And then I could take that and leverage data on AirDNA and then just look at competitive properties that were already established on Airbnb, pick apart their calendar, look at the amenities they had, what made them successful, what were they renting out per night on the weekend and weekdays. And it was really just a numbers game for me. I just wanted to keep it super simple and make sure I understood the investment. So I want to also make sure that on a conservative forecast, because Airbnb obviously can be seasonal, things like COVID happen, like things can change quickly and you don't have a set lease agreement. So it can fluctuate quite a bit from time to time. So I wanted to make sure on a conservative forecast, we were still very healthy cash flow positive, great cash on cash return. And then we just found the one property. And it's funny looking back on it, I thought we were way overpaying for this property in Nashville at the time. Now it would be sell for probably 2x, what we bought it for, which is wild. But I'm very glad we took the leap and finally took action. I think that was one thing I regret, is not taking action sooner, because I was well equipped with as much information as I could find on the internet, but you know how it goes. You're going to learn most through doing. So after that first one, it was just a good learning practice nonetheless. And it was a great experience.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's definitely this hurdle of you've learned, but taking that first step is still a leap, no matter how much you know. And then
Yeah.
right. And then you get into it. And I completely agree with you. There's so much that comes from actually doing. You can only learn so much by reading about it. You actually get in, you start to touch and feel it, understand it. That's when you really create mastery of it, right? So walk me through the economics of an Airbnb investment, right?
Yeah.
Walk me through kind of purchase, how you're evaluating that. What are you looking for return wise? And then walk me through kind of what do you see kind of month to month?
Yeah. My minimum cash on cash returns to total annual cash flow divided by total out of pocket investment has been 25% with short term rentals. I want upside too. Many of them have been north of 50%. But there's a lot that goes into becoming a top performing property. But the biggest thing for me is just cash on cash return. I want cash flow. That was the ultimate goal for us. How can we get to financial freedom as quickly as possible? I mentioned AirDNA earlier. That is a very, very valuable tool, because today's day and age, there's so much data and resources and software out there that make investing and monetizing and managing short-term rentals yourself easier. Because 10 years ago, 20 years ago, you'd have to have a local PM, hand keys to a guest, and it costs a lot of money to do it. You couldn't communicate over the internet. So by leveraging those types of data and tools, and AirDNA has historical occupancy trends, you could use filters, look at specific zip codes. I want to only look at a 3-bedroom in Nashville that sleeps 8 to 10 people in this zip code. And here's all the data the past 3 to 5 years from occupancy, daily rates. And one thing that helped me, and I always tell people, look at the top property section on AirDNA. They're literally on a silver platter for you of what amenities you need, what are the themes that they have, and then what specific locations within that market they're located in. Usually they're clustered on a map in one or two specific sections. So I don't have to recreate the wheel. I just have to jump on board and follow what everyone else is doing. And then if I can, create my own unique twist on it, because the way I view Airbnb is that it's no different than social media, right? You're trying to capture someone's attention. They're scrolling through thousands of properties. They have to click my property to learn more about it and get through the rest of the photos. If I don't earn that first click, that impression, I have no at bat to get booked. So there's just lots of data and resources that anybody can leverage, and they're cheap to leverage too.
I love that. You got to earn that first click. Yeah, 100%. If they're scrolling through, how are you going to get them to pay attention to yours? And I'm sure that's what layers into some of your secret sauce and having so much success in the space.
Mm-hmm.
So you mentioned that there's significant cash on cash, 25 to 50% cash on cash. What does that look like through kind of the ups and downs of the demand swings? I mean, what can you typically expect, like as you're underwriting and what you've seen play out? Like, what does occupancy look like? How does that kind of go up and down? I imagine it's kind of a feast or famine type of situation in some instances. So kind of tell me how that looks.
Yeah, the devil's in the details, and with data. And again, I keep mentioning AirDNA, but they have everything there, even available supply of rentals in the market. So I can see what's trending. Like during COVID, places like the Smoky Mountains, everybody pivoted their travel there, and there was not enough supply. So all the investors went there, and now there's over a 50% increase in 2 years of rentals available on the market. And now that demand is pivoted back to urban areas or overseas. So you have to make sure you're aware of current trends, but leveraging historical occupancy rates and just general seasonality is really important, because if you're in an up by you, if you're in a northern lake, you might be slammed, May through September, but it might be quiet and you might have to pivot your strategy, maybe do like a corporate housing, like a 3-month lease or something during the winter time.
Hmm.
So I like to be in places that aren't hyper seasonal. You
Hmm.
can still do really well in a seasonal market, but it just makes that busy season that much more critical for you to perform very well. So for me, I like to be in markets. There's probably going to be slow months in every market, but in markets like Nashville, South Florida, the Smoky Mountains, it's relatively busy like 10 months out of the year, because I don't want to be in a position where I cash flow decent and all of a sudden I go through a 6-month period and I'm like, oh man, I got to make sure I'm like staying afloat here, paying the mortgage, paying the cleaners, all that good stuff. So just paying attention to the data is really critical, I would say, and understanding that if there is seasonality, what you can expect.
Gotcha. No, that makes complete sense. And then what is that's the revenue side of things. Are there any other ways you're generating revenues from the property besides the just like, the rent payment or I guess you
Yeah,
call it
yeah,
rent
like the
payment
nightly
with
rate
Airbnb? Yeah. Are
for
there other
sure.
things?
Yeah, there's some really creative ways that you can add revenue with each stay. You can even create automated messaging to only send out if the day before or the day after someone checks in or checks out is available, to offer an additional day at a 50% discount or an early check-in or late checkout fee to extend their stay a little bit. Um, Once you scale to several properties, if you get an early check-in for $100, if that adds up after several, you could add an extra $1,000 of revenue a month pretty easily.
Mhm.
There's some other cool integrations or services that you can offer if you want to be a more involved host per se. One of them is through Hostfully digital guidebooks. They have a hook now with Viator, which people can book tours and activities. You can actually get an affiliate link created. And it's an awesome thing because guests love getting local recommendations from the person who owns the house, but you get an 8% commission on anything booked through your affiliate link through Viator, which is super cool. So there's lots of creative ways to add revenue. If you want to allow pets, you could do pet fees. If you have like a pool and a pool heater, you could do a pool heating fee per day. So there's lots of little things that you could add in there and just generate extra revenue to pad that a little bit.
Yeah, very cool. I've seen other examples of people like actually selling things out of their Airbnb, right? Like, oh, you like the soap or the lotion? Like here,
Yeah,
you can take it, you know?
right. Yeah, I've heard of people
I've
doing
stayed
that.
in some like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's awesome. I appreciate that. So there's other revenue opportunities as well. Talk to me a little bit about the expense side. Like, what's the expense ratio look like? What can you expect as you get down from like revenue to income?
I would say the cash flow margin, essentially profit margin, in my opinion, is usually 40 to 50% for my properties. Right about 40 to 45% ever since we refinanced them and pulled cash out of a lot of the deals that we did over the past several years. But historically, it was about 50%, which is awesome. So if I were bringing in 100 grand a year from a property, I would expect a cash flow of 40 to 50K on that property. And that's been pretty consistent across properties. Now, something I've realized when getting a couple new properties in South Florida with pools, and some of the expenses there add up a little quicker, right? Pool maintenance. If there's an issue with the pool, you have to pay pool maintenance to go out again. And just knowing what like the services are, like the trash service. Do your cleaners take care of that, or do you have to pay somebody to come put the bins out, bring them back in? Because the city will ding you if you're not responsible, So some of that stuff can add up, but the biggest expenses, like operating expenses, outside of like property tax, insurance, there's just going to be your cleaning fees. But the guests pay for those too, which is nice. So it's kind of a pass-through expense. Other than that,
Mhm.
it's just the ongoing stuff to keep the lights on in the property, utility bills, Wi-Fi, permitting, all sorts of stuff like that.
I gotcha. And is you pay the utilities, it's just all baked into the nightly rates and ultimately what you'll get. That doesn't pass through.
Correct. Yeah. You don't pass through utility bill unless somebody signs like a short-term or midterm lease.
Sure.
Then maybe you could have them agree to pay it in the lease agreement. But yeah, for short-term rentals or vacation rentals, you're definitely picking up all the utilities and Wi-Fi and all the other costs that you would in your own home.
I gotcha. So clearly a lucrative investment, right? You can get significant cash flow, 25 to 50%. You said even on just an income side, you're about 40, 45% profit margin. And it doesn't sound like I mean, definitely there's things you need to know to do it, but it sounds like a fairly approachable path to get into investing as well, right? You just have to, you give us some tips on how to identify the market. Um, Seasonality, I think, is one definitely to take into account, right? I mean, I think that's a big one, right? It seems like you want to be somewhere where there's going to be demand all year round. Um, and then I think your tips on air DNA were great as far as really use that to drive where are the popular areas, right? And like you said, they lay it out on a silver platter for you. So, so talk about you've had these Airbnbs, you've obviously had a tremendous amount of success. That led to taking your learnings, kind of taking your learnings online and starting to share those, right? And ultimately creating a pretty large following around that. So tell me a little bit about that. Kind of how did that start, and tell me how that growth has been.
Yeah, so I followed a lot of people on YouTube and then some other social media outlets as well, like Instagram and whatnot. And I learned a ton from them. So I was like, well, maybe I could start posting my own content and just see where it goes. Maybe I could just share what I'm learning, right? Help other people as well. I was trying to do YouTube so hard that, I just wasn't good at it early on, honestly. It was a big learning curve for me. I actually pivoted to TikTok and I was trying to funnel people from TikTok to YouTube. And I was trying to do that for a long time and my TikTok grew and I was like, I'm not thinking about this the right way. Like people love short form content now. Why don't I just have TikTok and Instagram be like my main platforms? So I started doing that. I started letting people just book free calls with me so I could share with them with what I was learning. And I had several people say, do you have a course? Do you have a course? I'm like, no, I never thought I would build a course and sell it, and I had taken courses in the past that I found on social media. So I was like, oh, could be a good business opportunity. So they said, if you build one, I would buy it. And I was like, really? Okay. How much would you pay for it, type of thing? So I spent a lot of time and I wanted to do a good job building that and put it out there on TikTok initially, had a bunch of people start buying it. I'm like, this is crazy. But the positive feedback was overwhelming. And I had a lot of people, to this day, I think I've had like 750 people take my online course, and pretty much all positive feedback, and tons of people have reached financial freedom since seeing my content, taking the course and taking action. And that is like the most fulfilling thing I've had in any type of business or employment that I've had my whole life. So the monetization part of it has been wonderful. I've been able to scale to a 7-figure business in a year and a half, and it's all driven through organic content. I don't really pay for ads yet. I don't know if I will, but that has led to other things, just the abundance mindset of sharing. And I feel like it just helps me grow too.
Mm-hmm.
So I've met a ton of people, ton of other content creators like yourself today, like networking with awesome people, investors has been wonderful. And that's helped me actually scale to some other business opportunities. I've had tons of people offer to like partner with me on deals. So there's just tons that have come from it that I never thought possible when I was just small-minded, thinking of like, what would I even get out of putting myself out there content wise, So
Yeah.
it's just been like a whirlwind the past couple of years, but I'm grateful for it for sure.
And I love that story so much because like take it back to the beginning. It started with you getting an Airbnb and getting financial freedom, like being able to leave your job, right? Without that, none of this ever would have been possible. Now you've made this massive impact, like you said, to 750 at least other people, let alone all the people that have listened to your content online, right? That have, and a good portion of them have been able to reach financial freedom on their own. So you've had this just massive impact you've created that all started from buying an Airbnb. And really it all started with your mindset of realizing that like, I don't have to sit in this grind for 30 or 40 years. There's a different way. And you're able to get there extremely quickly, which credit to you. And then you're already giving back. So I just think it's an incredible story of, and like you said, that abundance mindset. I mean, that is what it comes down to, that belief that you can do it and that more is going to come, and that your expenses are investments, right? And that you're growing something. I think it all just ties together. So love that story. I think that's inspiring for folks. I'm sure people listening will be inspired to go out and maybe just start with that one Airbnb, right? You're clear proof of where it can go from there. So really appreciate that today, Michael. And so as we round out the show, we've go to our keys to success round. There's 4 questions I want to ask you. The first one is, if you were going to invest in somebody else's deal and you could only ask them one question, what would that one question be?
It would be, what is the conservative cash on cash return that you're projecting on the deal? I think the health of any business is cash flow, and I want to know how hard my money's working in that investment and will produce cash output. So
Mhm.
if I know nothing else, I just want to know that metric. And then obviously, if there's follow-up questions, just how did you get to that conclusion? Can you show me the data that enabled you to draw that conclusion of the cash on cash return?
Yeah, absolutely. And you are a true cash flow investor, true and true. That question just rounds that out. What are you most proud of in your career?
Oh man, I think just reaching financial freedom myself and then helping other people do it. I didn't think I would have that impact on other people. At first, selfishly, it's just how can my wife and I become financially free? And we're expecting a baby in the next week, by the way. So it's our first kid. So having that established,
Yeah,
the financial freedom,
congratulations.
thank you, the time freedom aspect and being able to be home with the kids while we raise them. It's that is super fulfilling to think about. So I'm super proud of that. And then just
Yeah.
helping other people do the same thing is just icing on the cake.
Man, that is something to truly be proud of. I mean, so I've got a family. I have 3 kids, 6, 5, and 3 years old. And if I look back really about 7 years ago, I mean, that was really one of the main catalysts that started my journey, was looking ahead, looking at what I was doing in my W-2 and saying, I've got to make a change. So I completely understand where you're coming from. I love that you're already there. I mean, it took me time to get there, and some of that time is when they were young, when they're still when I was still traveling a ton, doing different things. I mean, you're there. You're going to be there for every special moment, and I love that. I had something, just to share a personal story of when I set out on this journey for financial freedom. One of my things was, I want to be that dad that's able to be at the field trips and the recitals and different things. And so my kids now, first grade, kindergarten, I got another one in preschool. Well, my kindergartner has a field trip coming up in a couple weeks, and I get to be a chaperone. Look at that. I was like, this is really concrete proof that even in my own journey, I was setting out to do that, and I could do that, and I get to go on the field trip with them and really just be a much greater part of their life than I would have ever been had I still had my sales and consulting job and still be traveling all over the country. So definitely, man, you're going to realize so much value out of that and have so many magic memories with your kids because you are in the position that you're in. So again, I think really, I hope inspiring to folks. I hope people understand how they can get there. As I get derailed coming back around, the next question is, what book should everybody read?
There's a lot of good books out there. I personally, the one that helped me, it was really more of a mindset shift. It's called Cash Flow Quadrant, somewhat of a sequel to Rich Dad Poor Dad. There's some fluff in the book and it drags out a bit, but my biggest couple takeaways was just addressing the idea of risk and investments. And the whole idea that our corporate jobs are safe, which they feel safe, right?
Mm-hmm.
Get a paycheck each month as long as you show up to work, and insurance and all that fun stuff. But the risk of working 40 more years and spending 40 plus hours a week away from my wife and my family, that seems so risky to me. And the risk mitigation, or not risk, regret minimalization framework, I think Jeff Bezos made that kind of famous. I don't
Mm-hmm.
want to be on my deathbed or at retirement and regret not taking the risk of making that investment to become financially free. So I don't risk spending all this time doing something I'm not super passionate about away from my family. It's that was the biggest takeaway and mindset shift I had. That was my nerves went away and I was what's the biggest thing I can lose if I take a
Yeah.
leap and make this first investment? Some money, and what I'm still working my job.
Yeah.
That's still safe and secure, I guess, if you want to think about it like that. So there was the biggest, it was a mindset shift for me. That was a good takeaway from that book.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, that goes back to that abundance mentality of believing that the more you put out there, the more you're going to get back. You got to take that leap. Faith over fear, right? Lastly, what is your number one key to success?
I think it sounds really simple and elementary, but just take action. Um, you can learn as much as you want. You could spend money on courses as much as you want, even like a course that I put out there, but you're not going to become financially free. You're not going to get better at something unless you try or take action. Even like something for me, social media. Like I was nervous to put myself out there, and for like a year, I didn't see any benefit from it. But like if I never decided to take action on that, I would not be in the position I'm in today. And same thing with real estate. So I think it pertains to anything. You have to try, like get comfortable being uncomfortable. If the end goal is what you want, you got to take that first step. You just got to go for it.
Yeah, absolutely. That is the key to success. Become comfortable being uncomfortable. Love that. I think that's a great place to wrap it up. And Michael, thank you so much for coming on the show. If folks want to learn more about you and what you're doing, your course, your content, how can they get a hold of you?
Yeah, reach out to me on Instagram. It's usually the place I respond to most comments. You can go to bnbinvestoracademy.com too if you have interest in learning about that program. But yeah, Instagram, TikTok, it's at melefante6. Yeah, we'd love to hear from you guys. I appreciate you having me on, Ken. It was a great conversation.
Yeah, I'm inspired. Maybe I'm going to go out and get into some short-term rentals now. Seems like a great cash flow play. Had a lot of fun with you, Michael, today. Thanks for being on, and I hope you have a great rest of the day.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it. You too.